new directions which will be coming from my office to the Correctional Service of Canada will ensure a number of things. First, and most importantly, that victims' rights and sensitivities are appropriately taken into account when any decisions regarding inmate transfers are made. That's important. Secondly, that I am directly briefed in cases that are similar in terms of there being high profile or where they're dangerous offenders. And third, and again, most importantly, and out of respect for those who could be re-traumatized by these decisions, that victims' families are notified.
Public Safety Minister Mendicino there responding to Tory demands for him to resign with a new 3-point plan for high-profile prison transfers. But the new directives for the Correctional Service of Canada did not blunt the political pain for the minister.
And I'll be happy to take more questions.
Here's how a scrum with reporters kind of went and ended on Parliament Hill today, and the barrage of questions for the minister continued in the House of Commons.
Will the Prime Minister show the courage to stand on his feet and explain to victims of Paul Bernardo why he wanted to give this monster more freedom and comfort?
Yeah. He knows very well as well, Mr. Speaker, that we have a system we're not supposed to interfere politically with that.
We have a bill that would make sure every mass murderer stays in a maximum security penitentiary. It's before the House. Will the government pass it with unanimous consent today?
That the conversation that we have has to be measured. It has to be based on cooperation. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, based on the underlying premise that every member cares equally and deeply about this, about two things, about the victims, absolutely, but also about not politicizing our correctional services system.
So where do things go for the minister from here? With me tonight to talk about that, former Conservative Cabinet Minister and Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt. She's now the head of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. And David Herle was the campaign co-chair for the Liberals under Paul Martin. He's now a partner with the Gandalf Group and host of The Curse of Politics and the Hurley Burley podcast. Hi to both of you. Great to have you with us tonight. I appreciate you making the time. Lisa, I'll start with you because you've been a minister for a number of years. Do you see a way out for this minister?
I have not heard the Prime Minister support him yet, and that would make me very nervous. He's been asked the question, meaning he being the Prime Minister, and he's gone silent. So I don't know whether Mr. Mendicino has the backing of the Prime Minister, and that's what you need in order to keep your job at the end of the day. And maybe people are looking to see how this is actually playing out and how much heat there is going to be around it. I think the Minister is doing as good a job as he can in communicating it, but he referred to it as the Bernardo affair, and that just means we're off the rails. When he's referring to his own scandal as the name of a scandal, he's lost the plot.
David, I think that Lisa's point on the Prime Minister is well taken. Like yesterday, he received some very specific questions from reporters on the Tory calls for the minister to resign, and he did not say, no way, he shouldn't resign. Like there was no voracious defense of the minister. There was a, oh, he'll speak to that in a little while, and I understand why you're so upset about what's happened here with Paul Bernardo.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, although I still don't expect anything to happen on this front in the near future, unless there's another shoe that drops. I think that Mr. Mendicino's future will likely be determined in a shuffle that's widely expected after the conclusion of the session sometime this summer. He could be moved laterally, he could be moved down, or he could be moved out. But I certainly think that if you were him, you'd like to hear a stronger expression of support from the Prime Minister, for sure.
Lisa, the subject at hand, it's kind of complicated because basically what happened this week is that people learned that his office, at the minister's office, knew about the pending transfer and didn't communicate that to him. And then when he came out, he said he was shocked, which I think many Canadians were. What do you think of the idea that the staff didn't relay that information? Does it create an impression with Canadians? In what would you be saying if you were minister, I guess, still?
Okay, two questions in there. What does it mean? It means you got to ask you got to ask yourself who's in charge, Who's in charge? Minister's supposed to be in charge. Who's in charge if they are curating the information that the minister's receiving? And if it happened to me that my staff wasn't giving me information, first I would be absolutely devastated, because staff become your friends and they become your family. And if they didn't have enough respect for me to protect me from making a tweet like Mr. Mendicino did, that would be really hurtful, quite frankly. And I know we don't normally talk about it in terms of emotion, but I would be hurt. But then comes the tough part. What do you do with your staff? And they didn't brief you. They're supposed to brief you. The bond is broken. The trust is gone. What else can you say? How can you work with them?
David, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that in this government, it's difficult to trace ministerial responsibility. So, Lisa's made the point, what do you do with your staff? Well, if ministerial responsibility means anything, it means that ministers are responsible for the actions of their staff as well as themselves, and because they theoretically chose those people. But in this government, chiefs of staff to ministers do not report to the minister. They report to the Prime Minister's office, to the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, just like deputy ministers report to the Clerk of the Privy Council. So the minister doesn't have a person in the way that Lisa was describing. The minister has a PMO appointed person working for them who reports to the PMO. So what do we know in this instance? We know that the minister's staff knew in March, and we knew that the PMO knew in March. And we know that the minister did not know until it happened. So is this a Marco Mendicino management issue or a PMO management issue?
Let me just follow up with you and ask, what impression do you think that creates among Canadians who were very gripped by this case for decades and have a high level of public awareness around it?
Well, the other thing that the minister might be grappling with is that the Department of Justice will have an extremely different view of this than Canadians. Canadians don't care about the principles of sentencing in this respect. They care about the fact that nothing good should ever happen to Paul Bernardo again. Only bad things should happen to Paul Bernardo. So moving to a medium security sounds like something good for him, and people don't like it. The Department of Justice will fight that vehemently. They've got very strong belief in principles around sentencing and rehabilitation and all sorts of things. So in this case, though, what can Canadians take from it? I think the government looks incompetent. It looks incompetent on a stream of things. This is the latest in a series of things where there doesn't seem to be accountability, where people haven't taken responsibility for what they've done because there's been so many links in the chain that it was hard to find where the blame actually lied. I think one of the things the government should do is change this policy they have about chiefs of staff, let ministers have their own chiefs of staff, and let them have some independence to manage their departments on their own so that we can see whether they're good or not.
Lisa, last word to you on the question of competence, because I think what David says also kind of reminds me that a few days ago, Bill Blair, for example, was saying, CSIS never gave me that information about Michael Chong. They should have called me directly. And then weeks before that, the Prime Minister saying I was never made aware of it as well. And now I'm issuing it. Like, we've had more directives issued to different bodies in the past 3 weeks than I've ever seen in 10 years of covering it. Like, what impression do you think that creates? And ultimately, is it a vulnerability for the government long term?
So I think what they're showing is that they don't care about the working of government, that they would prefer to do other things and actually manage the day-to-day. And I think it opens a big door for Pierre Poilievre to walk through and talk about the important things, like he mentioned, that bill that would make it legal so that any maximum security prison person, anyone who committed a mass murder like Paul Bernardo would stay in maximum security prison. I think that was politically very smart to do and probably is exactly what Canadians want. And the government has to say no. And the government has to say why they took 3 months to even think about what they should be doing next. It's a complete fail.
Okay, I've got to leave it there. I appreciate both of you making the time for the discussion. Thank you, Lisa Raitt and David Herle.